All right.
Okay.
We got it. We got it now.
All right. Thanks for being patient, guys. We are going to get started.
Start over.
Hello and good morning. Welcome to our Pests in the Library webinar. My name is Courtney Allison, and I'm the Southeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. I have with me Karen Ainsley, and she'll be moderating today's chat. I'd like to start off the webinar with a few announcements. This webinar is provided as a part of the Indiana State Library Services series. To register for other webinars available for this theme or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, please see our continuing education website. The Indiana State Library has many ways we try to stay connected to library staff across the state. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Wednesday Word. We also offer a blog which provides information about the Indiana State Collection, interview spotlights on library staff from across the state, and information about upcoming events at the Indiana State Library. If you have a question, just type it in the chat box on the upper left side of the screen. Karen will be watching and will get your question to me as soon as there's a good opportunity. And there should also be time near the middle and end for questions. This session is 1 hour, so you'll get 1 LEU for today, and I will be sending those out sometime in the next few weeks, along with a link to this webinar in case you want to refer to it in the future. If at any point during this webinar you experience any technical issues, please enter your issue in the chat box. And without further ado, get ready to feel itchy. This is Pests in the Library. So here's our agenda. This presentation is a general overview of different kinds of pests that can invade your library. We're going to learn about 6 different types of pests and their characteristics. We're also going to go over what to do if you're invaded, how to provide correct information as librarians and library workers, the importance of policies in your library, and then I'll have some resources for you as well. So I'm going to go ahead and warn you, there are pictures of rodents and insects coming up, so I just want you to be aware and ready for that. So the first thing we're going to talk about is rodents. Rats and mice are the most common rodents that librarians are likely to encounter. Rats are difficult to control because they are capable of gnawing through cinder block, lead and aluminum sheeting, wood, plastic, and sheetrock. The most common rats are the Norway rat and the roof rat, or also known as the black rat. The house mouse is very common and extremely difficult to eradicate entirely. Both rats and mice use paper to make their nests, so it's important to get rid of them quickly if they take up residence in your library. Rodents' fecal matter and urine are especially damaging. So you'll want to look for the following signs of infestation. Rodent droppings found around food packages, in drawers or cupboards, and under the sink. Nesting materials such as shredded paper, fabric, and dried plant matter. Signs of chewing on food packaging, holes chewed through walls and floors that create entry points into the building, and stale smells coming from hidden areas. It's generally better to trap rodents than to use poison that will allow them to crawl into building crevices and die. Not only due to the smell, but rodent carcasses are breeding grounds for insects that also damage library and archival material. So here's a handy comparison of droppings, just so you can get a feel for how large they can be and what you're looking for. Next, we're going to move on to insects. Insects pose a serious threat to collections of all types. The environment that's most damaging to collections are the most beneficial to insects. So high humidity, poor air circulation, and poor housekeeping. Libraries and archives can provide insects with food, water, and shelter if the building is accessible and conditions welcoming. If insect damage is evident in a library collection, a careful survey should be conducted using sticky traps to see what type of insects are causing the problems. Now I'm going to go into specific insects. So another warning, you're going to feel itchy after seeing these pictures. First up is cockroaches. Cockroaches seem to be found in every part of the world, and they're pretty tenacious. There are about 3,500 types of cockroaches, and they can be divided roughly into urban types that live exclusively indoors and outdoor types that breed and survive outdoors, but can also move indoors when conditions are favorable. Substantial damage to library materials can be linked to various large species of cockroaches. Fecal material, streaking, and chewing damage can happen overnight. In addition to the direct damage to library and archival materials, you must also be concerned with the suspicion of cockroaches as a disease carrier. Many references can be found documenting a variety of disease organisms in and on cockroaches and their fecal material. In more recent years, several studies have shown that people are allergic to cockroaches, particularly the German and American species. So cockroaches exhibit a gradual metamorphosis. Eggs are formed in a double row encased in an egg capsule projecting from the rear of the abdomen of the female. The egg capsule is dropped and may hatch within a day or up to 2 months later, depending on the species. Nymphal cockroaches emerging from an egg capsule have no wings and crawl about seeking a food source. After developing through a series of stages, the cockroach will emerge as an adult capable of reproduction. The 4 types associated with damage to library materials are the American cockroach, the Australian cockroach, the Oriental cockroach, and the German cockroach. And we'll take a look at each of those in a minute. All 4 species have a large mouth and a fondness for starch, so book cloth and paper are especially vulnerable. Cockroach damage can be recognized by multiple light patches on book cloth surfaces, sometimes all the way down to the thread, and ragged edges on paper. And cockroach droppings can also be detected in the feeding area in the form of pellets. So just a note about droppings. It's not great, but this illustration shows both mouse and cockroach droppings. Mouse droppings are pointed and cockroach droppings have ridges. Cockroaches leave feces or droppings that are easily identifiable. The feces of small cockroaches are black and resemble ground coffee or black pepper. Large cockroaches leave black or brown droppings which are cylindrical in shape and have ridges down the side. And as I mentioned before, the German, American, and Oriental cockroaches' feces and saliva contain proteins and allergens which may trigger an asthma attack. So here is books that are stained with cockroach droppings. So that's what that looks like. So now I'm going to show you the different types of cockroaches I mentioned earlier. So this is an American cockroach. They hide in dark areas during the day and emerge at night. This species regurgitates a sexual attractant in the form of a brown liquid, often seen on library materials. They're approximately 40 millimeters in length and reddish brown. They're largely an indoor insect, preferring moist, warm areas. The Australian cockroach is smaller than the American cockroach. It has light or yellow markings on its thorax and wingtips. Commonly found in most moist tropical areas, this insect can live inside. This is the Oriental cockroach. It's also known as a water bug. It's large and dark brown or black. It prefers cooler, moist areas such as drains and usually inhabits the lower floors of buildings. And this is the German cockroach. Capable of living outdoors, the German cockroach is most commonly found indoors with a preference for warmer and more humid areas of a structure. So in homes and buildings, these insects will typically be found in kitchens and bathrooms, but can move to other areas of the home if moisture and food is available. In most cases, cockroaches are introduced into a structure or residence when bags, boxes, or cardboard containers have been brought into the building. They may even be brought in with used appliances. In multi-unit apartment buildings, cockroaches can easily move between units using the shared plumbing and pipes as a highway. They're scavengers capable of feeding on most any food source available, including toothpaste, soap, and the bindings of books. They're also known for their ability to capitalize on the availability of even the smallest amounts of food by feeding on crumbs missed during cleaning or feeding on dirty dishes left in the sink overnight. Cockroaches are known for their ability to reproduce quickly. Female cockroaches only need to mate once for the production of young. After mating and under normal conditions, they produce, on average, 4 to 6 egg cases during the course of their lives, with each egg case containing approximately 30 to 40 eggs. This egg case is then carried by the female until 1 to 2 days before hatching. Depending upon conditions, the average time for development from egg to adult can range from 54 to 215 days, with an average of approximately 100 days. As adults, cockroaches survive about 100 to 200 days. So once cockroaches make themselves at home in a building, it can be very difficult to kick them out. They can snack on your food, damage wallpaper, books, and electronics, and some species of cockroach also spread germs to humans. So to keep these out of your space and keep them from coming back, you'll need to choose a bait, insecticide, trap, or barrier approach that works best for you. Next up is book beetles. There are more than 250,000 species of beetles. Some damage books directly by eating paper and binding materials, but it's their larvae that cause the most damage. One type, the carpet beetle, has been known to damage leather bindings. So here are a few different types of beetles that can invade the library. The bacon beetle, or sometimes called the larder beetle, is roughly 9 millimeters in length. The rear of the body is pale with black spots, while the rest of the body is dark brown. The larvae feed on leather bindings and when fully fed bore into text blocks of books to construct a pupation chamber. The cigarette beetle is a small light brown flying beetle that commonly infests books. The beetle's larva is one of the types popularly known as bookworms, with eggs laid on the spine of a book and along the edges. Immediately upon hatching, the larvae tunnel under the binding cover, especially down the spine area. Then they proceed to tunnel up to 10 centimeters into the paper text, where it pupates into an adult beetle. The adult leaves a round exit hole as well as powdered paper on the shelf. One of the beetle's favorite food is dried flowers and spices, so these should not be brought into the library. The bread beetle, sometimes called the biscuit beetle, is pretty small. It's about 2 millimeters and reddish brown, and it has a very small larva. The larva feeds on starch material, especially the rice or flour paste used on end sheets and book spines. They can create a borehole of approximately 1 to 2 millimeters that runs parallel to the height and width of the book. So next up is the drugstore beetle. The larvae of the drugstore beetle are also often referred to as bookworms. This beetle is found in moist storage areas, and the larva can actually tunnel all the way through a book from one cover to another. As with the cigarette beetle, piles of paper powder signal that this insect is active. The best way to avoid insect infestation is to keep storage and display areas clean. Dust and debris provide food and shelter for insects. In addition, food should never be eaten near the collection since the smallest crumb can become an attractant. Bookworms aren't really worms, they're actually the larvae of several species of beetles. While these insects don't generally attack modern books, they pose a significant threat to aquarium books. They seem particularly fond of the glues used on the back of older books. From the backs of books, the insects often move onto the block, munching right through the pages. In any case, a visual inspection of your collection is the first and best way to prevent insect damage, and regularly scheduled inspections should take place routinely. Look at, under, and around each piece of your collection using a bright light. Check storage boxes, envelopes, and display cases thoroughly. Framed items should also be inspected regularly. The adhesives used in framing may be an additional draw to insects, which can do all their damage inside the frame before you even know there's any damage happening. So next up, we're going to talk about termites. By far the most damaging of all insects, the damage they can do to all paper-based materials can be catastrophic, and that entire collections can be rendered useless by the severe nature of the attack, often before the infestation problem has been recognized. Termites are pretty difficult to detect because they don't come out into the open. They build protective tunnels with their saliva and fecal matter near the foundations of infested buildings. So this is one way that you could detect an infestation. So there are three main types of termite. There are dampwood termites. Those live in dense forests. There are drywood termites, live in warmer climates. And then there are subterranean termites. So here's a picture with the different stages here. So these termites are in every state except Alaska, and they are commonly found in Indiana. So termites eat all cellulose material, including wood, paper, binding cloth, and binding boards. Some protection from termites can be worked into the building design. For example, use of metal sheeting over wooden foundations or painting any exposed wood. But the best remedy is cleanliness, prevention of moisture, and constant vigilance. Termite infestations can usually only be dealt with through the use of pesticides applied by a qualified operator, although there has been some success with berry traps that attract subterranean termites. So next up is silverfish. Silverfish are wingless insects that are silver in color. They can cause damage to tapestries and other fabrics, wallpaper and wallpaper glue, and they can consume and damage glue and book bindings, book covers, and paper materials. They grow about 3/4 of an inch long as adults. Their bodies are thicker in the front, then taper off toward the back like a teardrop. They can't fly, but they run quickly if disturbed. They can live up to 8 years, and they're nocturnal creatures that reproduce pretty quickly. They prefer dark, moist, and moderate to warm conditions, and they tend to graze on the surface of paper, and they seem to prefer coated paper. Paper that's slightly ragged and thinning at the edges is usually the work of silverfish. Their small, flat shape makes it easy for them to be concealed in cardboard boxes and other items brought into the library. So some signs of infestation are irregular or notched damage to paper or books, fecal pellets, which are small and dark and loose, yellow stains on paper or fabric, and small irregular scrapings on book bindings. Silverfish are medically harmless and are noted simply to damage goods and contaminate food in your home. Infestations of silverfish can easily go unnoticed since these insects travel and reproduce quickly and are active at night. Since juvenile silverfish grow faster in humidity, the best way to prevent them is to control your building's humidity levels with a dehumidifier. Although do-it-yourself treatments work to kill the occasional silverfish, it's best to hire a pest control professional for infestations. So this is the one we're all familiar with, bed bugs. It seems to be an issue in a lot of libraries. Just a reminder, this will be a general overview. If you're looking for a more detailed information on bed bugs, we have a webinar titled Bed Bug Boot Camp scheduled on April 13th, and I would encourage you to sign up for that. The two main ways bed bugs will enter your library are through returned or donated materials and on the clothing or belongings of anyone entering the building. They can be found in carpets or upholstered furniture, but will also hide in non-upholstered areas if they are less likely to be disturbed. The best way to prevent a large collection-wide infestation is to train staff to spot evidence of bed bugs on incoming books, both donated and returned, interlibrary loan bags, and around the library itself. So signs of a bed bug infestation include, obviously, presence of live and dead bed bugs, exoskeletons that have been shed, bed bug frass, so feces, eggs, and crushed bodies, and blood staining from crushed bed bugs. Adult bed bugs generally are about the size of an apple seed, about 1/4 of an inch long. If they've not fed recently, they're long and brown with a flat oval-shaped body. If they have fed recently, they're balloon-like, reddish-brown, and more elongated. They also have a smelly, musty, sweet odor produced through the glands on the lower side of their body. Young bed bugs, in general, are smaller, translucent, or whitish yellow in color, and if not recently fed, can be nearly invisible to the naked eye because of the coloring and size. And then the eggs are tiny, about the size of a pinhead, pearl white in color, and if they're more than 5 days old, they can be marked by an eye spot. If evidence of a bed bug is discovered, immediately quarantine the book by placing it in a Ziploc style bag. Use clear packing style tape over the seal to ensure the bag doesn't come open. Place the sealed book into a large plastic storage bin. Clear is best so you can see what's inside. So at this point, you'll have two options. You can discard and replace the books. This is usually good for a small number of affected books, or treat them. This is better for a large quantity. The decision to discard or replace or treat the affected books will depend on your library's policy and budget. Treatment can be somewhat costly. Therefore, if only one book is affected, replacing it might be the best option. So the treatment options include heat. This is achieved by using bedbug ovens made specifically for treating bedbug infested items. The internal temperature of the book must reach a steady 120 degrees for at least 1 hour to ensure live bedbugs and eggs are destroyed. This treatment can be used on interlibrary loan bags as well. Just to note, this should only be used on circulating collections. Special collections, archives, and older books can suffer serious damage if placed in these chambers due to the nature of the materials they're made from. The second treatment option is freezing. So this option is time-consuming and the equipment required can be expensive. A specialized freezer which can bring the internal temperature down to a steady -40 degrees for 1 week. And then you have to take the books out to encourage eggs to hatch and then put the books back in the freezer again for another week to kill those insects. The books must be monitored to ensure all insects are killed. This treatment is recommended for special collections or older rare materials. This process cannot be achieved with a standard home or commercial freezer, and special precautions must be followed in order to prevent water and mold damage to the book as they go through the freezing thawing cycle. A professional conservator or pest remediation company experienced with this process must be consulted. And then the last treatment is the low oxygen treatment. This treatment is pretty expensive and requires professional assistance. Since the process can be dangerous for people, it's not recommended for libraries to set up unless a professional conservator with experience is on staff. These treatments can also have adverse effects on certain materials, especially older books with wooden boards. A conservator should also be consulted before selecting this treatment. for use to ensure the books will not suffer damage during the process. And just to note, after you treat your books, they should be cleaned with a dust brush just to remove the bodies and frass before returning them to circulation. I'd also like to eliminate some misinformation, and there's quite a bit of misinformation on the internet about ways to DIY bed bug treatment. It's not worth the risk to yourself or your staff, your patrons, your home, or your library to try to DIY a treatment without proper equipment. So the first thing I'm seeing is rubbing alcohol vapor. This is not an effective treatment for bed bugs. Rubbing alcohol will kill bed bugs and eggs, but only upon direct contact with the liquid. Exposing them to the vapor inside a chamber might kill some live bed bugs if the vapor concentration is high enough, but those inside the book as well as the eggs will likely still survive. The vapor is also dangerous to inhale large amounts, so this method could expose your staff to breathing problems. There is no scientific proof that rubbing alcohol vapor alone will eradicate bed bugs completely. Using a home oven of any kind to treat books is dangerous and should never be attempted. While it's true that paper takes a significantly higher temperature to ignite, that does not mean that plastic, metal, chemicals, or adhesives you can't see inside the book binding and paper might not react poorly. You also have no guarantee that your oven is keeping a steady temperature for the time required. Bed bugs are resilient, and fluctuations in temperature might allow them to survive, so don't attempt a heat treatment without proper equipment. And then the last thing, chemicals should never be sprayed directly on any materials that patron and staff will be handling later, especially books and paper, as these absorb the chemicals like a sponge. The residue left behind could cause someone to become ill or have an allergic reaction, and could also adversely affect your books. So if you do have a bed bug issue or infestation, there are a few recommended supplies to have on hand. Some gloves. So these are useful for situations involving mold, excessive dust, animal damage, as well as pest situations. And make sure they don't contain latex. Zip top style bags in a few different sizes. You can put suspicious books in those bags. And then you'll also want some clear packing tape for sealing the books inside the bag. And then a large clear storage bin to further contain any quarantine books while considering your options. And then you also might want to invest in some inexpensive pest traps. These can be placed around your library in inconspicuous areas as well as in your book drop to monitor for pest activities. So steps you can take. The first thing you can do is reduce clutter. Clutter serves as an ideal habitat for bed bugs. By reducing clutter in your workspace, you provide fewer places for bed bugs to hide and fewer opportunities for them to hitchhike to your home. Keep your belongings stowed separately from those of other people. If there's a known problem with bed bugs in the office, consider storing your belongings in a plastic bin. Be vigilant in areas where bed bugs are most likely to be found, which include break rooms, storage areas, coat closets, cubbies, offices or lounges with upholstered furniture, or areas where people may rest. Establish a monitoring program so that if a bed bug is found in an area, the status of that area will be formally tracked. Multiple sightings in the same area could indicate an infestation or multiple reintroductions from someone's home. And then you'll also want to educate the staff so they know what to do if a bed bug is found or a bug that appears to be a bed bug. You'll want to discourage the panic and stigma associated with bed bugs. These are counterproductive and can make treatment more difficult. If your area is experiencing high levels of bed bug infestations, it's highly recommended that you consider adding at least an annual bed bug inspection to your budget, although quarterly would be preferable. Bed bug detection dogs can be much more accurate in finding sources of bed bugs and can inspect much faster than visual inspections conducted by humans. The bed bug dog can range from $250 to $350 an hour, and they're a great way to establish whether or not you have bed bugs, and where the bed bugs are present in your library. This can mean the difference between spending thousands to treat an entire building or just hundreds to sort out a few small problem zones. So now that we're all queasy from the pictures, we can move on to what to do when you've been invaded. We'll stop here if anyone has any questions or has any comments to add. Okay, the number one thing you need to do is to train your staff. Have a procedure in place, make sure they know what to do if an infestation happens. You'll need to inspect your materials, make sure you're not putting infested books back onto the shelves. Inspect your buildings, not all the time, but pests usually keep a trail of damage, be able to identify that. And then protect your library, take the necessary steps to prevent an infestation. So to prevent pest infestations, you will need to thoroughly inspect your building inside and out for each type of pest. Discourage rats and mice from taking up residence on your property by removing food and water sources and items that can provide them a shelter. Seal holes inside and outside the building to keep rodents out. This may be as simple as plugging small holes with steel wool or patching holes inside or outside walls. Remove potential rodent nesting sites from your property, including leaf piles and deep mulch. Keep kitchen garbage in containers with tight-fitting lids. I know some libraries do gardening and garden programs, so if you have a compost pile in your library, be sure to cover to turn the compost pile to cover newly added food scraps. And you could also stop feeding outdoor birds while you're controlling an infestation, or feed only huskless items that leave less residue that can be food for rodents. So if insects have come inside your building, you can impede their mobility by securing inside doors, especially those leading to areas such as the kitchen or restroom. Consideration might be given to fitting these doors with a weather seal. You can also fill cracks in inner walls or on the floor to prevent insects from entering. Display cases and special storage cases should be fitted with gaskets to ensure tight-fitting seals. Fittings, cases, and room corners should be regularly vacuumed and the vacuum bags checked for insects. Filled vacuum bags should be disposed of outside the building immediately after removal. So we talked about this a bit with bed bugs, but for killing insects, you can use the freezing method as well as the heat method. I know a lot of libraries use this with the bed bug ovens. One of the things that many libraries do not consider is the fact that they invite pests into their building sometimes by creating a hospitable environment outside of their building. Cornell University advises that libraries consider the following steps outside their building to discourage pests from coming into their workplace. Don't plant shrubs or trees close to the building and avoid flowering species. Remove vines, ivy, and other climbing plants from the walls or roof. Use a wide gravel or paving to surround the building, ensuring that there are adequate and effective drains to prevent water from entering the structure. Do not attach lights to buildings as they will attract flying insects. Insects tend to be attracted by ultraviolet, so lights close to the building should have a low ultraviolet output. All garbage, including garden and library waste, should be kept in vermin-proof containers away from the building. Ensure all roof drains and downspouts are kept clear of debris and in good condition. Bird and other animal nests should be removed from the building. Seal all unnecessary holes in the building and seal and caulk around holes for electrical cables, water pipes, telephone connections, and waste pipes. Doors and windows should be tight-fitting and kept closed at all times. And insect screening of an appropriate small mesh size should cover every opening. And when designing a new building, consider the installation of a revolving door. So how do we make the building inhospitable from the inside? You can also deter the entrance of insects by using a solid, impermeable construction material such as brick, stone, concrete, and steel. HVAC systems create a wet and moist area, and central systems have condensate drains. HVAC should be located in a basement rather than on the roof, and steps should be taken to ensure there's no standing water in those drains and they're always clear. I know this may not be possible in all libraries, so be aware that you need to check these areas more often for possible infestations. Keep your collection separate from restrooms, janitor areas, and workspaces. Condensation on cold water pipes can be avoided by wrapping them with an insulation material. Have a quarantine room or space for the inspection of newly acquired materials, maybe close to an entrance or the loading dock. If incoming materials appear to have some form of insect damage, they should be covered tightly with plastic sheeting, and insect sticky traps should be placed under the plastic to check for possible infestation and which insect is the issue. Keep the interior of your building clean. This means dust and remove dirt that insects feed upon regularly. Water spills should be immediately mopped up, and care must be taken when washing windows and floors that excess water does not permeate the structure through the cracks in the walls or floor. Keep food consumption and preparation areas away from the collection areas. It's preferable that food and drink not be consumed in the reader and staff areas, although this is often difficult to control. Spills and food debris should be carefully removed and waste receptacles emptied regularly. Receptions and events involving food and drink should not be held in the reading room or adjacent to a collection area. Refrigerators and appliances that combine heat and moisture are popular habitats for insects. Areas under and around these appliances should be regularly cleaned and sticky traps placed if necessary. So as librarians and library workers, we want to provide the public with factual information. Bedbugs are a big issue in most libraries, so to prevent public panic over bedbugs, communicate calmly, professionally, and be upfront. Dispel information such as the inaccurate assumption that a dirty home will attract bedbugs. Anyone can have bedbugs anywhere, regardless of social class, income, and other factors. Remind patrons that bedbugs don't transmit disease, and also help patrons find resources in person or online that can help them get more information about bedbugs. So the Utah State Library has printable fact sheets available on their website on different pests. So here's the one on bedbugs, but they also have sheets on beetles, cockroaches, mice, and silverfish, among other things. The LaPorte County Public Library provides a bedbug FAQ. You can't really see it here, but it answers questions like, I have books from the library, should I be concerned? Will the library close if bedbugs are found? What if I find evidence that my library materials are affected by bedbugs? And then they also include links to some more information. Having a policy in place is important. In your policy, you'll need to establish a way to inspect materials. This will help find and eradicate the infestation promptly. Have measures in place for prevention, control, and other elimination. Make sure all staff is familiar with the procedure. So this is the policy from the Pulaski Public Library. I won't read it all, but part of it says here, examples of situations where borrowing of materials may be suspended include evidence that items on loan to a customer may have been returned with insects that are known to be damaging to library materials, like roaches, silverfish, and some type of beetles. And then also the same that can cause pest infestations in library facilities, so bed bugs and roaches. So they've put a policy in place to protect their collection. Here is the Denver Public Library, and they have a patron procedure posted on their website for patrons who've come in contact with infected items. So they basically say, do not return items in the book drop if you think they've come in contact with bed bugs or other pests, and then to make arrangements with the library. So they've put a procedure in place for not only their staff, but also patrons. So these policies are a way for libraries to protect themselves, as well as having a written guide in case infestation happens. I've also included a number of resources. A lot of the things I've mentioned in this presentation are listed here, as well as other libraries who have posted pest information on their website. And then I've also included the Utah State University site for the pest fact sheets. You're going to get a copy of this PowerPoint when I send your LEU, so you'll have access to all of this. So that is Pests in the Library. Does anyone have any questions, or maybe has some comments on maybe they've had an infestation at their library and what's worked best for them?
I just have one comment to share that was posted in the chat, and that had to do with the dog. If the bug dog finds something in the area, then treat it, or will you need to close and treat the whole building? And the response of the experience here at the State Library stated that we're pretty sure you can just treat the area. We never closed at the Indiana State Library, but we've had areas treated.
And I'll add to that, the library that I've worked in the past had the dog in, and we just treated the area. The dog is great because, you know, you can go one shelf over and the dog can detect whether that area is infested or not, and we ended up just having to treat a small portion of the collection. Does anyone else have any questions?
How do I find the dog so I can hire?
There is, I know a dog that works in the Indiana area. I'm not sure of the name, but, oh, great. So Suzanne just posted in the chat box a link to find the dog in your area.
What was the name of the library that had the pest policy concerning patrons? Was that Denver?
The Denver Public Library posted for patrons what to do if they think their materials had come in contact. And the Pulaski Public Library is the library that talked about possibly banning or restricting patrons. And I can send those with the LEU and the presentation, so you can have a copy of that.
And then somebody just made a comment in the chat room that before you have the dogs come in, don't spray for pests before the dogs come in. Apparently that's problematic.
Oh, that's good.
Including deodorizers. Don't use deodorizers. There's nothing else. There was just a comment that I guess that the custodian had wiped down tables with perhaps the deodorizer. So anything like that's going to kind of compromise the inspection, is what they're saying.
All right.
There's one more question. How can you isolate an area if bugs are found, for example, under boxes? That, for instance, there's no Ziploc bags big enough for that.
I think in that instance, if it's found and things that won't fit in a bed bug oven, that's when you would have to consult a pest professional. All right. We are going to stay online for a few more minutes. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box and we can get back to you. I will send out your LEUs in the next couple of weeks. I will also send out a link to this presentation as well as some of the materials I talked about, so you can have access to those as well. Thanks, everybody.